Coming to you from Studio HQ, this is Think Indie Extra. Before I introduce our special guest today, let's talk about Buy Indie Comics Day. So, Buy Indie Comics Day is an event um, Saturday, October 1st. Please ensure that your local comic book stores get involved and have your creators like our guest today be in your store, sign their books, and just mingle with fans. Most importantly, have fun. Buy Indie Comics Day, October 1st, 2022. And with our special guest, he is an author, an artist, and creator of Good Agent number 1 to 7, now available on Amazon, and Heat Vision Anthology series, also available via Amazon, and the upcoming project, which we'll be talking about today, Under God. Please allow our thinkers to welcome Dan Membiela. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Dodgy. I appreciate it very, very much. I want to make sure before we get started that I recognize. Thank you for creating this space, and thank you for
Mhm.
making space for me on this creation of yours. So thank you very much. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, my pleasure. No worries at all. Look, and that's the thing about Think Indie is as we want to create avenues for creators like yourself, because one thing is we can talk about your books, but to have you in person, I think is equally important. And just to know a bit about your story. So, let me ask you. So I know that you're of Cuban ancestry. You grew
Yes.
up in Miami, now living in Michigan. Um,
Mhm.
in that span of your life, where did comics get involved? Where did your love of comics come from?
So just very, very early, comics were always in my house. Had I have a had a brother who was 10 years older than me. He's passed away now, but he was into comics, and essentially everything that I like, I got from him. I
Hmm.
adopted all the likes, and then even though later we disagreed on which type of things, the genres, all the genres,
Hmm.
I just copied my older brother's the genres
Hmm.
that he loved. So yeah, comics were just always in the house. I always wanted to be making comics, trying
Hmm.
to draw like they did in the comics, and it was just always uh, just a fundamental part of my growing up. Like,
Yes, and it sounds like there's some sentimental value as well. Having an older brother who was into it, and then you just carry his passion. I guess.
yeah,
Would you say that's
definitely.
the case?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very true. And I even sometimes, when I get a copy of something that we used to have, you
Hmm.
recollect something that used to be in the childhood collection. I'll
Yes.
think of my brother. Like, so yeah, it definitely there's a big connection there.
Yes, and so do you have any like what was the comic that really good was said to you? Wow, I need this in my life.
So uh like, excellent question. Since comics were there before, because essentially the comics were in the house I grew up when before I was in the house. So
Yes.
I think the best answer for that is, at some point as a teenager, I stopped collecting comics. I was too
Hmm.
busy with my job, trying to make money, trying to pay my car
Yeah.
insurance, trying to
Hmm.
uh, pay for my car, and I had just given up completely on comics. And on my break during at my the retail job that I worked at, ran over to B Dalton's in the mall. So this is a very old fashioned story, and
Hmm.
I would always just look through the spinner rack just to see what was going on. And I picked up this comic that was turned out to be Dark Knight Returns #3, and I
Hmm.
flipped through it, and I recognized Frank Miller from
Hmm.
Daredevil comics,
Yes.
and I was just completely blown away by what well, Frank Miller. Not only is Frank Miller doing a Batman comic, look at what Frank Miller is doing in this Batman
Yeah,
comic.
it's
Look at
so
what this
different.
looks like.
Yeah.
So I remember my buddy, who I'm still friends with today, was working that day, and I bought the comic and ran back to the break room, and we both,
Hmm.
just our teenage faces just melted looking through Dark Knight Returns #3. So I guess the comic that the reason I'm still looking at comics, because I don't know what other comic would have brought me back,
Hmm.
is Dark Knight Returns #3. So
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, Daredevil house style, and then you got Batman, which is so different.
yeah,
You
yeah,
would not believe it's from the same artist, but you can tell. And the same thing with Bill Sienkiewicz, same principle. House style versus his own abstract style, and that's the joy. And I wouldn't blame you really for jumping back in. But I think all of us have had that time in our lives where we've taken a break from comics and get back into it. We like it's not that we deliberately walked away; it's just things got in the way, and you just suddenly
right.
escaped, if you
Definitely,
will,
definitely.
subconsciously, and then realize, oh, you see a local comic book store, I might go have a look,
Yeah.
and that's
Why?
great, and that's the joy.
Yeah, I can't be mad at you, comics. You didn't do anything wrong
Exactly.
to me. Like, why
Yeah.
why aren't we broken up? Let's get back together.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's be friends.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah.
Yeah. So So you mentioned Frank Miller. Who else would you consider being your major artistic influence?
So, artistic influence. I mean, gosh, eh, I love. I mean, I'm not trying to say that my artwork is like the artwork of these
Mm-hmm.
people, but I'm trying to say like the artwork that I pay attention to try to do the things like these artists do.
Mm-hmm.
Is I'm a of course a huge David Mazzucchelli fan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's an artist Steve Yowell who did a really amazing run called Zenith with Grant Morrison, and it's predominantly black and white. It's
Mm-hmm.
color at the end, but that black and white section is just incredibly beautiful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy like Chris Samney. I There's a artist Tanchi Zanjic who's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing. He very recently did the Skull Digger and Skeleton Boy
Mm-hmm.
comic. So those I mean Al Williamson, and there's so
Mm-hmm.
many. I really I used to I actually wrote some comics in the '90s, some indie
Mm-hmm.
comics, and I
Okay.
used to always be that typical, oh well, who's the writer, what's who's the writer, and that's what I'll follow, just whatever's happening
Mm.
that way. Now I really appreciate comic art now that I have to draw a comic.
Yeah.
Boy do I appreciate comic art in a different way.
Yeah, I actually find that really impressive that you were following writers in the 90s because to be honest with you, from my standpoint, I was probably in my early teens when I was into comics and I was always following the artists. So to have someone following writers, I think is very yeah, like that's applaudable, bro. Like
Thank you.
yeah, no, seriously, like people were overlooking writers, couldn't care less who the writer was. I only cared about what the artist. But again, different. I was in a different headspace back then, and now I'm like equal par writers and artists. But yeah, so I mean, because we'll talk about writers now. Who would be your major influence when it comes to writing?
Well, I mean, so again, like classically from all those early works, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of all of those, of all the so many Alan Moore stories,
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
so many wonderful Frank Miller stories.
Mm-hmm.
Grant Morrison has done so many incredible stories. So there's like a pantheon of those writers. Currently, I really adore Tom King. I think Tom King
Oh
is
yeah.
really has such an incredible sense of emotion. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've recently realized so many times when we think back on stories and think of the emotional impact of the story, it's really
Mm-hmm.
the art that gave us that emotional impact. I
Yeah.
feel, but I feel that Tom King also really is one of the few writers who really helps share that lift of the emotion in the writing,
Yeah.
in the story. I don't think that's very common. I think most of the heart comes from the artist, but if
Mm-hmm.
you I feel like in a lot of Tom King stories, a lot of the heart, um, not the majority of the heart, but he's really load lifting the heart with the artist, which I don't think is really the norm.
Yeah, that's true. And like he hasn't worked with, terrible artists. He's worked with some pretty decent
Yeah,
artists
yeah,
and you're right because I absolutely loved his the Batman Reborn like after that was just amazing.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
and I think he went from issues 1 to 50 of that run, and like
Some
that was,
amazing stuff in there. Yeah,
yeah, it really is.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I really enjoyed it.
Did you read he and Mitch Grads did a Batman Black and White story? Um, that's a perfect example of the load lifting of the emotion. That's an
Mm,
excellent example.
uh, um, Mr. Miracle.
Oh
My
yeah,
goodness.
amazing.
Oh, as soon as you mentioned about that, because a lot of the panels in Mr. Miracle were just blank panels, and you
Yeah,
just see the text. It's just
yeah,
the text. So that's where that's also what from what you mentioned, the load lifting, because it's just a
yes,
blank panel, and there's text to it that really emphasize what the heck is going on, because that's an emotional roller coaster right there. That's
yeah,
an amazing run.
yeah. That one's really
Yeah,
something. Yeah,
yeah, no.
yeah. I mean that. Yeah, I adore his writing. He does an excellent job in
Hmm.
in the way he writes things. So,
Okay.
but again, that's I'm not saying that I'm doing that. You're asking me who I who I like who I try to pick apart and see the things. That's one of them.
Yeah,
And
no, definitely, and you're entitled to that because we do rely on our contemporaries to uplift us, to give us that inspiration. Let's talk about your website, Dan. So, you've got some really nice art in here,
thank you very
and
much.
can you explain this image here to the
Yeah,
fans?
yeah. I'm glad that you found this image. I actually went and looked up this image yesterday because I
Oh
thought,
wow.
oh, this would be an interesting image to since I'm for lack of a better term, just spamming tweets about Under God to get everyone interested in it and go look up the Zoop page. This is
Mm-hmm.
a very early, um, I guess, like concept art for the comic for the graphic novel. So
Mm-hmm.
I had most of the elements in, but uh, what she's wearing is different now in the actual graphic novel. She wears kind of a
Hmm.
fleece sweater over the
Yeah.
shirt. And then early, I had the story idea of uh, that there would be pink carnations on people,
Mm-hmm.
and that so it's in the concept art, but it's not in the graphic novel. It
Mm.
didn't make the cut when I started doing the comic. So just an exclusive back matter material on Under
Mm-hmm.
God. So actually, one of the ideas I had, one of the stretch goals in the campaign is going to be that if we get to 200% funded, I'm going to
Yep.
expand material so that I can have a square bound on the book. Um,
Oh wow.
and I'm going to add some concept stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason she's wearing a pink carnation is because the very first drawing, which isn't this one, that I did of this style mask. Do you remember a band? Have you ever heard of a band called The Outfield? It's like an old '80s band. They have that song. I'm not I'm not gonna even hum it because I'm so bad. I was just about to, but you would have had people
Yeah.
unsubscribing if I did that. Like I'm not gonna
No,
do that. I'm not gonna do that to you, Dodgy.
I
The
appreciate that. No,
so
but to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the band.
so anyway, it's a '80s band, and they have
Mhm,
I mean, and again, mm, this person talking about '80s music and comics.
mhm.
I'm very sorry for all the listeners that you're losing for just some old guy talking about comics. Like I could listen to my father instead of listening to this guy. Um, they have a song called "Mystery Man,"
Okay.
and in the song, one of the lines is a pink carnation on a mystery man.
Mhm,
And I just drew like, oh, that sounds cool, and I came up with this concept of like, what if the interior oval of the question mark is the brow of the on the face, and then the stick
mhm,
is the bridge of the nose. Um, so this is still using that very old concept of when I first came up with it. So
mhm.
none of that made it into the comic though. The the verse though, the Bible verse does make it into the comic. So
Ah, okay. Oh, nice. Yeah,
yeah,
because
so
I
that
did actually when I actually saw this image, it did kind of remind me of Under God, but I thought it might have been concept art to begin with.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it
so
definitely is
cool.
it definitely is concept art from Under God.
Yes, and I want to ask you about this too, because
Yes,
this has some sentimental value to me because I am from Australia, and I know this, and I'm definitely, and I wanted to make sure I'm asking the right question.
you
This
are.
is a Tasmanian tiger, correct?
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. So, why? I mean, do you mind if I ask, why did you decide to draw a Tasmanian tiger?
Well, aside from that, how awesome they look and
Hmm.
how sweet and sad that footage of there's that
Yeah.
video of the
Oh,
one
yeah.
last one in captivity that then died because of a cold
Yeah.
night. It wasn't brought in.
Hmm.
How heartbreaking that is.
No, no.
And I did a very short lived Instagram thread, hashtag or whatever. I'm not sure what to even call it, called
Hmm.
Solar Punk Sunday. So they were
Hmm.
just images of a future hopeful solar punk world. And part
Hmm.
of that world in some of those drawings is that extinct animals are re repropagated,
Nice.
repopulated.
Yeah.
So um so there so and so I did several pieces on Instagram. This
Hmm.
is one of, I think, like a four-part story. So that's
Hmm.
a like a solar collector behind them, and
Hmm.
and then like a drone comes to check on it, and they don't like the drone, and so it's like a whole little story.
Yeah, because it's crazy that these animals were marsupials, but they're carnivorous.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
they're not related in any way, but they look like canids. They're
Mm,
they look like dogs.
yeah.
They're such an interesting animal, and then they have that, they have again a dog-like tail, but also a thick, like possum-like tail. It's like
Yeah,
that
it's like
marsupial
curled, like,
tail.
yeah, coiled. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's such
Interesting.
a neat animal.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Yeah, like
I'm glad you
seriously.
saw that. I
Yeah.
didn't even make the connection that was going to be in there for you.
No, definitely, because I was browsing through your site, and anyone where can we find your website, Dan?
Well, so that's actually just my portfolio site. So the
Hmm.
easiest way to link to it would be through the bio, the header in
Hmm.
my Twitter bio. So that would
Yes.
be at Hal Roth on Twitter, and then my
Hmm.
portfolio site is right there.
Nice. So yeah, guys, if you can, Hal Roth, and just look for the portfolio because you'll see some amazing art here, and I stumbled across a few gems. So I
Oh, thank
appreciate
you,
that, Dan. You're
thank you,
welcome.
thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the book that I had a look at, and issues 1 to 7. Like I said earlier in the piece, it is available through Amazon. So where did the creation of Good Agent come from?
So Good Agent in two. So I like I said, I wrote some comics in the '90s,
Hmm.
and then I kind of just stopped. I was
Yeah.
unhappy with what I was able to do then, and then in 2016, the DC Writers Workshop was looking for submissions. So I
Hmm.
submitted to that, and I got all wound up, and I thought, well, oh gosh, I really loved doing comics, and look how excited I am. And of course, I
Hmm.
did not get accepted into the DC Writers Workshop, but but I thought, why now? It's so different from then because there are so many ways to put your places to put up your comic, and
Tell
so
me
many
about it. Yeah.
devices and things that make creating the comic easier than back then.
100%.
So I said, let's do it. I'm just going to make this
Mhm,
comic. So in 2016, I started uh, building all the. So it was in 2016 that I started thinking about it, and then in 2017 is when the first issue came out, and I'm actually quite happy with how the art in issue 7 looks.
mhm.
Issue 1 really was me like,
Finding your
how am I
way.
how am I going to do this? And I am, if anyone can see the difference in art between 1 and 7, it just proves that thing that everyone says the only way to get good at something is by just doing the thing. There's no on the side practice that you can do. You just go and do the actual thing, and that's the best way to get better at it.
Yeah. And look, and if I can just add to that, I think, if your issue number one is the same as issue number seven, then obviously there's no growth as a creator. So I think if you
Sure.
can actually go ahead and say that, that's amazing. So yeah, that's actually inspiring, Dan. So I'm happy that you have seen that growth.
Yeah, I'm very glad also. I I have to admit that I even stopped part way through issue 1 because I was so unhappy with the way something looked, and
Hmm.
then, I took a short break and then got back to it and redid it, and I was satisfied with it and enough
Hmm.
to get it done. And there's lots of really, I mean, there's that expression, done is better than perfect, which is 100% true.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
so there, it's just doing it. You just need to do it. And yeah, you may not be happy with it, but if it's what you want to do, then you just have to keep
Hmm.
doing it.
Well, that's it. And the fact is, it's not. It shouldn't be something you look back at and feel disappointed with. Just, I think, just having the story out there, especially if you're telling a good story, because sometimes the art, may not be. And I'm just talking in general. So some art you might look at may not be something that I'm comfortable in seeing, but if the story is told right, I think that overtakes what what the appearance looks like. But I
Right.
definitely I definitely enjoyed the pace of your story. It does have a little bit of that I guess in some ways like the original Daredevil. So from the Frank Miller, it has sometimes there's textless movement, but the art tells the story. I saw a
Right.
lot of that in your style, and yeah, it's
Love it.
action packed as well. Yeah, no, it's definitely awesome.
Yeah. So this is actually the first of 3 parts. So there's still, I'm going to get back to Good Agent, but I just
Hmm.
really, I had this concept for Under God, and I felt like I really needed to just get it out. So I'm
Yeah,
taking a break.
yeah, no, that's fair. And so you mentioned before about walking away, then coming back into it. What did you do to and for people that are listening that might need this sort of advice? What did you do to actually find that space where you're like, okay, I know what I need to do. I'm going to jump into it.
I did a short Good Agent story. So I did a 22-page Good Agent story, and
Hmm.
part way into it, I drew something that, I was kind of wavering on the whole concept of my art. I wasn't really loving
Hmm.
it, and then I was, just pushing myself along, and then I hit a block and thought, this just doesn't. I can't put this out. So what I
Hmm.
did was I did a short 8-page Good Agent story,
Hmm.
and I did all 8 pages, and I was able to
Hmm.
look at it. And again, looking at it now, I think, oh boy, I would never draw it the way it's drawn then. But it gave me then the satisfaction and the peace to say, like, I can do this. I can
Hmm.
totally just draw this. So I went back and redrew the part that I actually, on the original art from that page, there's, just a pasted panel over the panel where I redrew the panel and inked it. So it was satisfactory for that, and I moved on. And had I not, I would have never done issues 6 and 7 and all these other issues. That every issue
Yeah,
I really feel I've grown as an artist in it.
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And what motivates you to keep going? Like, like, do you listen to music or do you go for a walk?
Going for a walk is an excellent thing, and I do go for walks, just as part of mental health. And it for
Hmm.
creators, we live in our brain, in our skull so much that it's a really important reminder to know that this other thing that carries around the part that thinks is part of us also. So
Hmm.
that's an excellent thing to do. But while I'm working, I love listening to music. I
Hmm.
usually, if I have any video on, it has to be something that I've seen many times, so that
Hmm.
I'm just following along mostly, and then looking up at one scene or something. But
Hmm.
music is the main thing that I listen to while I'm working to, and it gets me in the Gets me going.
Right.
Soundtracks, because I'm an old guy, I like listening to soundtracks a lot.
No, there's nothing wrong with soundtracks too. um, so you started issue one. When did you start issue number one of Good Age?
So issue number one of Good Agent probably was started right around the end of the year. So it was probably started like in December of 2016. So
Okay.
2016, I think it was March. I applied for the DC Writers Workshop.
Hmm.
I think maybe it was August or something that I found out I didn't get in, and then I just started pulling together like all the ingredients of what I wanted to do. I actually I actually originally had before I really had the whole structure of the story. There's a gang in issue one, or in the first four issues. There's
Hmm.
a kind of a network of gangs that has one kind of a cult boss leader over them,
Hmm.
and that gang was a very diverse mix of people from different ethnicities. And that was when I was just throwing together, and then the the 2016 elections happened, and I was like, well, no, there's no way that they're going to be a diverse group of people. Like they're all going to be like a kind of like white supremacist cult,
Oh
and led by
gosh,
this
yeah.
white supremacist leader. And then I was like, that because I was, the other thing is Good Agent also then became kind of like my therapy comic, where I was like, all right, this is where all the people who are who deserve to get it are going to get it. Like, so
Exactly. Yeah, because that's the thing. I know that it was a turning point in U.S. history. At that time, like, well, the next 4 years were pretty
yeah.
audacious, I gotta say, to say the least. But it was good that you found some salvation from creating comics, and I think a lot of people need to take advice from that because it is therapy in many ways, wouldn't you say?
100%. It's even if you don't intend it to be therapeutic.
Hmm.
Even if you're just taking a painting class or a figure drawing class,
Hmm.
there's you can't take away the therapeutic effects of creating, especially
Yeah, I
if
know.
you're a person who is prone to creating and you're not creating. Oh boy, now that's a detriment when you're not creating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even like for me, washing the dishes is is therapy.
Well, I could see that
Well,
maybe with some nice
yeah.
music or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it is a way of escaping and just getting something done, right? You got to end up with a finished product.
Yeah, that's
Um
true. Very true.
yes, and now we're going to be talking about Under God. So your new upcoming project. Um just in a nutshell, what will people know, or what do you want them to know about Under God?
Okay, so I'm gonna flip it because I do have that elevator pitch, but I think it works best at the end instead of at the beginning.
Okay,
So
all right.
so Under God is about what happens when your beliefs and your conflict and your values are in conflict with each other. Under
Mhm.
God is about the weaponization of religion. Under God
Mhm.
is um, the taking the talking points of some people on the far right to what seems like it might be an absurd conclusion, yet some people are
Mhm.
actually saying things like this right now in the real world, not in comic books. Um,
Mhm.
it is, and something that is in Good Agent a lot is also an Under God, which is um, the value of incremental good. That no amount of good done is inconsequential, even against a mountain of bad. One grain
Mhm.
of good still counts. It's still a step in the right direction.
No, absolutely. And talk to us about Samantha. So Samantha Scarlin is she's a graduate and she's involved in the situation. So where did the character of where did that character come from?
So I wanted to play with the concept of um, the a person who has been taught the to be the best, who has
Mhm.
been taught the given the best values, and given a certain belief system. And what
Mhm.
happens when that person uh, sees something that goes against what they they believe in, and also what they're being told to do or to propagate is against their values. So
Mhm.
now they have to make, where they've got to, one they both can't stay. One has to
Mhm.
go. And sadly, in the real world, we see and hear that a lot, where people say say one thing, but then they do, they're saying they're believing something, and then their actions show that, that they're doing something else. So
Mhm.
it's it's kind of looking at that conflict.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit of propaganda in many ways. So and what kind of story are your followers going to be jumping into? Is it going to be an action story, adventure story? What would be the best way to explain what genre this will fit into?
So the genre is social science fiction, because it
Mhm.
definitely does look at social aspects. So it's not,
Mhm.
the Under God is not a treatise on theocracy, which is part of the story. It's not a treatise
Mhm.
on any of the things that I mentioned. Under God is told in a very private, small scale, intimate story of Samantha being part of this very privileged ceremony, and then
Mhm.
things running afoul, and her having to deal with the enemy. She has to deal
Mhm.
with the people that she's been protected from her whole life, and finds out that their situation is not the situation that she's been told her whole life.
Okay. And will this be a self-contained story, or this will be an ongoing?
It is a 44-page self-contained graphic novel.
Nice.
There is, the world does continue spinning, after the last
Mhm.
page. If
Mhm.
everyone loves it, I would love to make more Under God for you. If you buy Under God, you can be done with the Under God story. It starts and ends all in that cover.
Yes, and it is available via Zoop.
Correct.
Um, and have you done any other projects using Zoop?
Nope, this is my first crowdfunding project,
Ooh,
so a very
nice.
lot of firsts, a lot of firsts happening for me here.
Well,
So,
fantastic, and thank you for using Think Indie to be part of it, and I'm actually excited for you. So,
oh, thank you very much. Thank you again. I mean that sincerely. I don't mean that just as a line. Like, thank you for
mhm,
making Think Indie and being there for creators like me. I mean, it's such an incredible to the thing. You saw a need and you filled it. So
oh,
that's
thank you
just
so much.
amazing for me as a
You're
creator. So
too
thank you
kind.
very
Thank
much.
you.
No, it's just
It,
I'm just the objective facts. I'm not
no, I
I'm not saying
appreciate that.
anything than what you're doing. So thank you.
No, that's all right. And so for people to find you and they can find your work. So, let me just ask you, and where did the art style was so for people that have read Good Agent, would the art style basically match what you've done for Under God, or would there be some variations? What will fans be looking at?
I think it will generally be the same style of
Hmm.
art. I did try to do something with the style of Under God, where there is a slightly more refined, stylized, and even simplified the way I structure faces,
Hmm.
and just the drawings in general. I don't know that this is I'm not sure if I can say, like, this is the Under God style that it's drawn in, and Good Agent will be drawn
Hmm.
in the this may just be the way I'm drawing,
The Dan
progressing.
Membiela style.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So
Yes.
it does follow very much the Good Agent style, although I think this
Hmm.
looks even better than Good Agent 7, which I thought looks good.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it looks really good. So you mentioned so you mentioned in the hypnosis that this is for fans of the Long Walk, Martha Washington series, and V for Vendetta. What sort of connections did you use those books as inspiration?
I thought of those books. Oddly, I thought of probably The Long Walk the most,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really try to like reverse engineer or structure it the same way. But
Mm-hmm.
that just all of those books really show you a um, a, a a future that is not all robots and flying cars. Like, oh, I can't even. It may as well be another planet. It's almost like a future like 2 Tuesdays from now. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
little bit ahead. And then with just a few slight uh, tweaks of the knobs, it ends up in a really very different type of world that is
Mm-hmm.
totally, we can see the path to it from this world. So that's the kind of setting that this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the current America, but it it's just a few tweaks off. Sadly, very sadly.
Yeah, very sadly. Um, was this a project? How long were you sitting on this project?
So under Good Agent 7 came out in September of 2021. And then
Mm-hmm.
shortly, I always take like a little video game break and relax
Mm-hmm.
break after after a project. So I think I started on Under God fairly soon after. I started with all the
Mm-hmm.
concept work and figuring out
Okay.
what I was going to do. I did a little model sheet of the characters and figured out how
Mm-hmm.
what do the masks look like from the back and how do
Mm-hmm.
they attach and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so I probably started, I don't know, probably October. I started putting stuff down, and then I started on the work. So I do this all, I have a 9 to 5, and then I do this all in my spare time. So,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's anything that's difficult to make, it boy is it a comic book. A comic book can be very very demanding to create. So, and then the irony is we work extra hard to make it so that it can be digested as very quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You work extra hours, and if you're successful, a person can devour it just in a in a blink. So
Yeah,
it's
I know,
really
right?
counterintuitive, the process.
I've never actually thought of that before, but I have read comic books where I could read it in 10 minutes. But then, and as you mentioned, like that probably took months to make.
Yes, yes, it took months to
It
make,
took months to make, but
and oddly, if the person only took weeks to make it, it probably would take you longer than 10 minutes to read. Like
exactly.
the longer they take to make it, the faster you you can read it.
Wow. I just I mean, think about how many comics I've read and that have taken me that amount of time. But in saying that, though, if I can devour it in 10 minutes and still remember what happened, I think that's an amazing comic book. So
They did a good job. They did their job. They did their
exactly,
job right. So, but yeah, it just stinks that it takes that much
I
get
know.
it done. But I mean, that's just the art form. That's just how it is.
Yeah. So what does I don't want to give away too many of your tips and tricks, but how do you actually brainstorm? Like, do you just take notes and then do you walk away and piece it together? I mean, what does your process look like without giving away too much of your secret sauce?
Yeah, I mean, the concept that even have a secret sauce is hilarious to me. So, so I mean, it really varies a lot. Like for
Hmm.
instance, with um, that good. I'm sorry that I'm jumping back and forth so much, but
That's all
with
right.
that Good Agent 7 being the first of 3 parts, I
Mm-hmm.
literally took a sheet in Procreate and I wrote out all the must haves. So I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
a common thing that I'll do is I'll write out when I'm in that concept phase. I'll think this, these are things that I must have in the story, and then when I start to flesh out the story, I'll
Mm-hmm.
always at the top have it must have this scene,
Mm-hmm.
this scene, this person must have that, so that
Mm-hmm.
then based on those things, I can start. That's the skeleton, and then I can start
Mm-hmm.
fleshing out everything else from there. And if one limb starts to go out too far, I look like, oh no, remember we gotta have that in there. So
No,
that's
that's
a
awesome.
common thing that I do.
No, that's great. And just in terms of your style, like what part of you, Dan, will people find in your work? So if we were to find part of yourself, what would that be?
That's interesting. That's a great question. I think there is kind of like a quiet in Under God and definitely in Good Agent. There is a kind of the protagonist tends to be in the action, but tends to very much be an observer. Also, tends
Mm-hmm.
to really always be uh, observing the situation that's happening and taking note of things, like being a
Mm-hmm.
conscientious listener. um that's definitely me. That's totally me. Like, like trying to really capture what's happening when people are speaking around me, or people are around me.
No, that's awesome. And I've got this page here, and for the listeners out there, it's basically a an outline drawing of a person with the word "you" in it. So Dan, just explain to us what this is. I know this will be basically part of your your campaign for Zoop, but what does it
Yes.
actually mean?
Yeah, so one of the add-ons in Zoop is going to be so only one person will be eligible for it. It's
Mm-hmm.
so it's this one page that consists of three panels, and in each of these panels is this little undefined
Mm-hmm.
uh, outlined person. Uh, One, the person who wins that, who bids on that or claims that add-on, will be
Mm-hmm.
drawn into each of these panels, and then not only that, they will receive then that finished original art page as part of
Ooh.
that level.
Wow, that's actually, yeah, that's very impressive.
So that'll be so, and it's real. I don't know what the original art, so analog.
Mhm.
It's not going to be a digital file or anything. It's going to be that 11
No,
by
that's
17 page.
wow, amazing. Amazing. So I'm going to ask you some wrap up questions that I ask all my guests. So, you mentioned before that you listen to music while you're creating. What music do you listen to? What's your go to jam?
Oh, my go-to jam. I'm such a nerd. My go-to jam has to be Holt's The Planets.
Hmm.
I just adore it. If anyone likes is a audiophile, like, please go listen to Holt's The Planets if you haven't, because it is the best alternate universe soundtrack of a superhero movie that ever existed. Like, it's so many movies that you love that have soundtracks that you love base
Hmm.
their music on Holt's The Planets. So
Holds the planets. Okay.
yeah, if you listen to just Mars alone will knock you right out. It's the very first piece of Holt's the Planets, and John Williams most definitely based a lot of the Imperial March on on Mars.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Really?
it's not kind of like it. I mean, it's you're just listening to essentially the Imperial March.
Hmm.
So, and then there's, I don't know if you heard, if you saw the little video, Under God video that I made.
Yes,
I
yes,
made
yes.
two of them. That has Saturn from
Oh,
Holt's
okay.
Planet, and Saturn, Basil Polidorus from the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. He
Hmm.
based a bunch of pieces off of that Saturn piece from Holtz. So
Yeah,
it's just
wow.
an excellent album all the way through, or an excellent piece all the way through.
Wow. Very impressive. And what have you watched lately? Like, what have you been like streaming any services or like streaming any shows?
Yeah,
What have you been watching?
streaming. I love. I will. I'm sorry if they cure every disease tomorrow. I will never go back to a movie theater ever again. Streaming is for me the objectively best way to watch anything. I'm a big fan of Star Trek Discovery. I
Oh
really
wow.
am enjoying that immensely, and I'm very looking forward to the new show Strange New Worlds coming up on
Hmm.
Paramount Plus.
Yeah, I think I really need to get into that. Have you watched Picard?
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm enjoying Picard as well. I Picard definitely see, my flavor of Star Trek is the original series.
Hmm.
So Picard definitely has a next generation flavor, as
Yeah.
it should, which makes sense for it.
Hmm.
So I'm enjoying Picard very much, but I I I think Discovery is the most Trek thing since Trek. Now, I know a
Oh
bunch of people
wow.
would disagree, but it's just all original, especially the
Okay.
first two seasons. The first two seasons are incredibly original series flavor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, now you're getting me intrigued.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
go. We can party watch it.
Yeah, exactly. And so so in terms of so after after Underguide is all all into fruition, what will be next for Dan Membiela after that?
Thank you so much for asking that. I actually, so I really need to get back to Good Agent. But
Mm-hmm.
I really think the very next story I'm going to do is a story that has to do with mortality, and it's a story
Mm-hmm.
that has to do with saying goodbye to someone at the end of their time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the story is going to the story has is the main character is a character called Osisis. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually that's probably what I'll do right after Under God.
Well, please, once you get your project launched, come back on the show. Love to have you back.
Oh, great! This is great. So thank you very. I would love to be back. So if you ever
Thank
have a
you.
spot, just text me immediately. I'll be on whenever you want.
No worries at all. And I did have another question, and I just lost it. But look, Dan, you've been amazing. Thank you for joining us for Thinking the Extra.
Thank you.
And for the listeners out there, please check out Dan's website. You can find it via our well, what was your website again? Hal Roth.
Yeah. My Twitter is at Hal Roth, HALROTH.
Yes, and you can find out more of Dan's amazing work there. And thank you for joining us on Thinking the Extra. And please click like and subscribe and check us out at comiccrusaders.com to get more amazing content from our other shows on Comic Crusaders. And until then, see you all next time.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this Comic Crusaders production. For real-time news on all things pop culture, please feel free to follow us on social media. For articles, original content, merchandise, and more, please go to www.comiccrusaders.com. Also follow along with all of the websites of the Comic Crusaders family. As always, if you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel.